Thank you for joining, everyone. We have a really, really exciting panel here full of a lot of people that I like, which is always nice. And we're going to be discussing a few topics today. We'll flow through a few of the things that have been touched on before as well. But I do want both all Natalya, Andrew, and Gay as well to introduce themselves and why they actually think today's topic is actually so important.
Yeah, hey everybody, my name is Natalya. I work at LiveRamp. So some of you might not know LiveRamp. We're an identity resolution provider and a global data platform. Today's topic of digital disruption, it's so important that we talk about it because it presents a massive opportunity for businesses that actually have a grip on it. But I think on the other hand, conversely, for people who are really failing to come to grips with such a rapidly changing environment, can have massively dire consequences. And we see businesses subject to that sort of every day, every time we open up our umbrellas and our ad newses, and we see exactly what's happening. So it's really important to talk about it.
Hi, I'm Andrew Livingston. I look after Mediahub, as already been mentioned a couple of times. Thank you for that. Thank you, Gil. Disrupting digital media. I mean, I'm coming at it from a slightly different perspective, I suppose. I feel probably like the least disruptive person in the room. I believe we're trying to look at it from a consumer perspective. You don't necessarily see the disruption. They just see messages in the right place at the right time and how they consume them. So we're ensuring that we try to adapt our marketing and media planning to measure up with what the consumer's expectation is. And I guess naturally we end up being in the disruptive channels.
So my name's Gay Leroy. I run the IAB, which is the Interactive Advertising Bureau, so the industry body for disruption, I guess. So much to Esther's point, we look after a lot of governance and standards, which sounds really dull, right? But I like to think of us as sort of almost like a parent. So we really want our kids to grow, so disruption, changing, growing, trying new things without breaking things. So how do we actually keep running without falling over, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the best things you guys are doing is also instilling a sense of trust in the industry as well, that someone's actually looking after their ad dollars and making sure that they're not being flushed down the toilet and things like that. But I think we'll start with yourself, Gay, in terms of moving from more of an industry body standpoint. We've got a lot of media people in the room, as we saw before. A lot of us are familiar with ads.txt and I guess the benefits that's had on the ecosystem and cleaning up the kind of back end. From your perspective, Gay, maybe explain a little bit from your standpoint why it's so important and I guess what the evolution is of that.
Yeah, look, I think we've all seen the scary headlines around ad fraud in market, and some of that's true and some of that's vendor driven. But ads.txt was a initiative that came out of the IAB in the US. It's a really simple way of trying to cut out some of the fraud, so particularly domain spoofing. So people pretending they're selling inventory that they're not meant to. So it's a really simple solution, a little text file on a website that says these are the people who should be selling my inventory. So it's a little bit like, if you're looking to buy a Rolex, you know which shops have got the real Rolexes rather than the fake Rolexes. So it's been really successful in this market. We've got a really nice size of a market for rolling out initiatives like that. Last year we looked at about 91% of the AU domains, commercial domains within programmatic, had already implemented it. So it's had a huge impact in cleaning that up. Next steps with that, so they've just rolled out ads.txt, sorry, we're terrible industry for naming stuff, which will do the same thing for inventory within apps, which is where a lot of fraud and a lot of less transparency is in play.
And do you see that impacting things like geofencing that Gil spoke about before, in terms of everyone going onto their personal devices now? Do you see that as something that might put some more rigour around, I guess, the media buying on?
Yeah, look, I think anything that clears out inventory that shouldn't be there, right, will help marketers get what they're paying for. There might be some change in stats, so a little bit like James was saying with the BVOD data in terms of reach will look different once you move to people from analytics. Cleaning out the rubbish, you'll actually go, well, maybe I'm paying more for my CPM, but it's actually reaching the people, it's viewable, it's non-fraud, it's high quality. So, but yeah, so for geofencing, so look, any part of the industry where we can have good quality targeting of good quality inventory is fantastic. Though we have to, one thing I guess that hasn't brought up this morning a little bit, and it's sort of Andrew's point in terms of the consumer, just making sure we're planning for a future privacy compliant environment with all of it.
Absolutely. On that topic of, I guess, trust in the industry, Natalya, you guys have a lot of data that swings through your doors every day.
Yeah.
And I guess there's sometimes a common misconception in market on what LiveRamp is.
Yeah.
Is it a DMP? Is it a piece of software? Is it the same?
Yeah.
How would you describe that for the people in the room here?
Yeah, so I actually get asked this question pretty much most sales meetings that I actually go to. And it's understandable because both DMPs and LiveRamp have a data in, data out functionality. But at its core, we're both trying to solve very different problems for marketers. So when you think about what LiveRamp is an identity resolution provider. So our focus is on highest quality and accuracy of match rates, investing in those match rates, investing in our match traffic. The other part is that because we're dealing with known and unknown data, so when you think about it, PII and cookies and devices, we've got a really strong focus on security and privacy, and we're heavily invested in that as well. Conversely, a DMP is there to make it easier for marketers to deal with the variety and the breadth of the data that they have. So they'll focus their efforts on things like easy collection of data and features like really advanced modeling and analytics, and helping marketers to utilize that. Together though, so the way that I work with DMPs, and they're some of our strongest partners in market, is we actually play a really complementary role to each other. So whereas a DMP is great at pulling in all of that data, and we're great at being that identity resolution provider, we often are the underpinning identity resolution for a lot of our clients' DMPs. So we support them in pulling all of that data together to get that rich omni-channel view within their DMP platform.
And how would you, I guess, guarantee, I guess, security of people's data? Given that, you know, in a GDPR world, there's a lot to think about in its application, and it's used in many different forms and ways. How is LiveRamp doing that currently?
Yeah. So another question that I get asked all the time as well. So security is really important, but equally at LiveRamp, and I think to Gay's point as well, so is ethics and privacy when we're looking at data. So we need to go beyond security and consider and put the individual at the heart of everything we're doing. So from a security standpoint, we have patented safe haven architecture. What that basically means is it's an environment that has technical, operational and personnel controls, and any data that comes through to us is subject to those conditions. The list is endless, and so is the security, all the security docs. Anybody wants to read them, up to you, I can send them over. But the other part is that we're really passionate about at LiveRamp is ethics and privacy. So everything we do, we aim to go beyond what the law requires. So looking forward and making sure that we're putting the individual at the heart of everything that we do, whether that be our products, whether that be our execution, whether that be our communication to market. So when you think about it, what we have is a number of different initiatives like Global Data Ethics Program. They've got initiatives in there like Product Privacy by Design, which means that we're never retrospectively thinking about privacy. We're always proactively thinking about it when we're designing our products. We go insofar as we do with, industry bodies like the IAB. We talk to lawmakers and policymakers to make sure that we're always at the forefront of that, and anything that's emerging or any emerging policies, we can give our point of view and also be able to quickly absorb that and take that in-house as well.
Awesome. And Andrew, I'm not ignoring you at the moment, but I'm going to cross back to Gay. Gay again.
I can't add to this anyway.
Yeah. Fantastic. Get out. In terms of the standards that have been put in place to date, Gay, is that driving what LiveRamp essentially does and the actions that they take?
Yeah.
And what are those standards to begin with as well?
Look, I think there's numerous standards, but the whole data side of things, GDPR, I think it's been good for this market to watch what's happened in Europe, and we can get the learnings and hopefully, you know, imagine we'll go to something similar, but hopefully, particularly the consumer experience, which I don't think has been the most fantastic side of things. I think GDPR to most people in Europe means I have to close those annoying cookie messages. So how we can get better explaining that value exchange to consumers, I think it's something we haven't done particularly well as an industry. When you get people going, I really don't want you to know anything about me, but if you give me a non-targeted ad that's not relevant to me, you know, I'm really annoyed. So explaining that a little bit more in non-scary ways, so we get to the right middle ground. So like projects in you know, that IAB running out of Europe, we've got consent frameworks, you know, all the big players are playing along with that. And even simple initiatives, there's an initiative in the US called datalabel.org, and it's really just like a little nutrition label for data. It comes from this provider, it's first or second party, it's refreshed every 6 months. Who's meant to have it, the ethics around having that data, which I think is really, I think we're getting better at as an industry of being, I think we're getting better at marketing ourselves. So coming up with initiatives that actually make sense.
Absolutely. And knowing all that, Livo, with, you know, I'm going to call you Livo because it's more of an affectionate term, I think. No one knows you as Andrew. But, you know, yourself and your team at Mediahub, knowing all these things in place and that some channels are a little bit more under the microscope than others when it comes to data privacy and standards and things like that. How do you remain objective in your plans and the partners that you essentially engage on any given project?
Yeah, look, I think really it's kind of born out of, I guess, a philosophy of how we go to market, which is looking for an unfair share of attention. So we're not looking at, you know, channels and partners as the starting point. They're really the output, they're an outcome. You know, we start with the consumer and really try to understand who they are and what we're trying to achieve. You know, how much information can we find out about them? We've got bespoke tools in-house, and we've got obviously desktop tools to enable us to do that, and we get information from our third-party partners. But really understanding the consumer is the key driver to understanding where we're going to end up with in terms of channels and partners. We overlay the key idea, because we obviously work in an ideas business, and overlay the objectives that we're trying to achieve, and that starts to begin to filter out where we end up with our channels. And so that takes out the objectivity of it. As I say, channel becomes an outcome for that, really. And once we're in channel, again, it really becomes about understanding, looking at it from the consumer's point of view, you know, what are those passion points rather than just those popularity points, and I guess, you know, and where is context going to be more relevant than just the content that we're placing. So, and that's, I guess, you know, where we end up a lot of the time choosing channels like connected TV that James has been talking about, because we can see the relevance and the benefit back to the consumer, because ultimately that's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to get to the consumer, we're trying to get them in the most engaging way, and you know, and the metric for us is engagement over reach, and I guess that's again another sort of mantra that we would use in order to ensure that we're being objective in the way we choose our channels.
And you mentioned passion points. I think there's a passion point for a lot of people in this room would be to run simply good campaigns. That's what we're here for, that's what we do. You guys are born out of, a creative agency in general and spun off a media division. How, like for I guess all the media planners and buyers in the room, what advice would you give to, I guess, fuse creative and audience and media together in the best way possible?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of things that I'm not sure some things that you can cobble it together as a bit of a game plan. I think there's a few things that have fallen, the deck's fallen nicely for us in many ways. As you said, we're sort of born out of a creative agency, but also out of a digital agency. So our DNA, our heritage is from Profero, which some of you may remember from, it's been in multiple markets around the globe, but also Mullen Lowe. So that combination, that platform for us has enabled us, I guess, to think a little bit differently. So we're fused from the beginning. I think the next kind of level up is the environment that we create. So, you know, we're round the corner up in the rocks, and, you know, we are all under one roof. So creative strategy, PR, production, you know, we're all in that room together. So that's a massive enabler for us. And of course, we've got systems and processes, how we go to market and how we work and how we solve ideas together. And I think so, you know, that leveraging everybody understanding how their role is and how they contribute in means that we don't necessarily start with a creative solution or a media solution. It's about how do we work together to make them work together. I mean, I think the first thing here is to recognise that, fusing kind of creator and media insight or data, whichever you want to call it, is always going to lead to a beneficial outcome. We call that, we refer to that as creativity being an economic multiplier. I'm sure you guys have heard us use that language. And recognising that and having that as your endpoint enables you from the start to kind of do that. So as I said, we had the right DNA, we've created the right environment, and we've got processes that enable us to make sure that we're leveraging both the creative and the media effectively, again, for the consumer's end benefit. There's no point having a great plan or a great message unless you get it to the right person effectively. Absolutely.
And I guess on that data point, Natalya, I think focusing on TV a little bit, considering it's one of the topics of today, a lot of people don't realise that I guess you can fuse a lot of first-party data with TV. I think it still accounts for only about 1.5 to 2% of I guess BVOD and AVOD executions in Australia is actually using first-party data. It's not that it's not technically possible. It's just that it's unknown and it's underutilised. So I guess from your perspective, how do you go to market in basically letting people know that it's actually possible and how to do it?
Yeah, so it's definitely underutilised because I think, though, it's about how do we adjust our conceptions of what we saw TV to be and TV buying to be. So TV has always been traditionally a channel of mass reach, and that's the way we've always spoken about it. Now we're kind of on this journey of integrating advanced audience targeting into the concept of TV and TV buys. And because we all know that age and gender is probably not the best way to define all of our consumers. So how do we move beyond that? Traditionally, I suppose, the technology really hasn't been there to connect this first-party data or this second or third-party data to a screen or to an individual. So now what we have is the ability to actually connect clients' first-party data and utilise that across the BVODs and the AVODs. But it's relatively new. The concept of connected TV is on the rise and everybody's talking about it, but the ability to use really advanced data, people aren't still sure how to do that. So at a company like LiveRamp, the way we enable it is we connect that first-party data to an identifier that you can target in the BVOD environment. So a publisher-specific ID, for example, we can integrate that and push that through. So an example of like a campaign we have actually just gone live in the last couple of days, is in flight at the moment, is a retailer of ours, big retailer. They are using their first-party data. It's the first time they've done this, their first-party data to execute a connected TV campaign. They're supplementing that with linear as well. What we're then doing is working with that BVOD provider. We're going to get the exposure log, so all the people that were actually exposed to that CTV campaign. The retailer has great offline transactional data, so we're really lucky there. We've got one of those at point of sale, tap your card, so we can collect all of the transactions. They will pass them back through to LiveRamp. We'll append that persistent ID, so now we can see everybody that was exposed to the ad and people that actually went in store and purchased. We're passing that through. The way we're working with the agency is we'll then pass that through to the agency, and the agency will help to drive their client to understand who converted and where those conversions were happening and how long it took for those conversions happening. So there are a number of different use cases that we can start to execute on, given that we now have the technology to utilise first-party, second-party or third-party data across these screens. But I think the simplest and not to get overwhelmed and the easiest to execute on is just look at 3 key use cases. One is targeting. So how can I just simply target that audience in the same way you might be targeting them through any other channels? The second is suppression. So the big sort of conversation I always have with my clients is if you want to get immediate ROI on what you're doing, why you're targeting existing customers for a prospecting campaign, for example. And the third is personalisation. So you can start utilising your first-party data to do more personalised creatives across things like connected television as well.
Cool. And Livo, you guys run a lot of TV campaigns yourselves. What are some of the best, I guess, uses of TV? You could say one of your own, it's fine. What are some of the best uses of TV and data and creative fusion that you've seen in market?
I think, for us, we've got, several cases. I mean, the reality of, pending first-party data for us isn't quite there, I don't think, but where we are at, I mean, of course, we always use first-party data. We just get it directly from the client as opposed to having it sort of necessarily in digital format. So, I think where we've had that ability to leverage connected TV, we've been doing that for a long time now. And obviously getting the right message in the right place. I mean, for us as a business, we probably run more sort of BVOD, AVOD, whatever terms and references we're calling it, than we do linear TV. And again, that goes back to understanding how we can connect with the consumer. But again, I think using that first-party data and using examples where we've got a better creative outcome and a solution that's impacted the consumer better. And Bird Box, which is a Netflix movie, some of you may have seen. I personally gave it a 6 out of 10, but that was a movie. If you all know Netflix, they're not particularly good at sharing data. But they're a US-based company with a US-based product primarily, and it's our job to try to localize that in the Australian market. And I think we have to get insight from them about that and the consumers and what they're reaching into and their audiences to enable us to be able to do that locally on ground. And in this instance, again, that creative diffusion of media, of course we get all the assets directly from Netflix. We're not a creative producer for them, but in this instance, we've got to move beyond their basic assets and understand how we connect with the local consumer here. And for that, we create a content series. If you've seen Bird Box, it's the birds that are the protectors of the people against the bad thing. So we use birds, and we created a video content series called Bird of Mouth Reviews. Very witty. But it used Australian birds, so it's connected locally. It was humorous, but again, that was all insights based on what we got from the US-based team, our own media insights from here, what we're trying to achieve locally in terms of objective, but also layering and creativity. And that was those content pieces. A, went viral, but B, were around the world as well. So they're at Entertainment Tonight, etc. So that was a really good example of where we've taken. Again, it's for me. The model hasn't changed a great deal. We're always using insights to give us best outcomes. They're just getting packaged significantly better and measured significantly better. But that's a great example for us where we've just elevated, what would ordinarily be a push out that TVC or that poster out into the marketplace. How can we make it more targeted, more relevant, and more connected to the consumer?
Not on the measurement, Gay, as well. I mean, some of the pitfalls, I guess, of the TV industry so far has been that everyone's kind of comparing it with very familiar metrics from display and video, like viewability and completion rates and things like that. From your perspective, and I guess from the IAB's perspective, do those kind of metrics or standards need to be defined better or completely redefined in the first place to kind of separate TV and online video in general?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, the conversations I have on, I guess, digital video inventory are completely different depending on who I'm talking to. So if I'm talking to a very senior marketer, actually the metrics they want are exactly the same at that top line. It's the reach and frequency across different channels. And that stuff's still hard, unfortunately. And then if I'm talking to a digital marketing director or someone within the industry, it's the more interesting, tangible, how can I manipulate, optimize, the stuff we've been talking about today. So there's a real gap in the middle. And then sometimes we get a lot of noise of the wrong digital metrics. So something like viewability on connected TV has still been a barrier to some investment, which is, sort of counterintuitive, but it's a real thing, unfortunately. So new standards like VAST 4.1, which is ad serving, which gives verification services within apps, which will help both mobile and CTV. You're starting to see mobile and CTV have similar sort of tech needs, will help solve some of those barriers, even if they're not rational at times. But yeah, I think both. You're going to need both. You're going to need that really overarching, that person level reach, frequency. It sounds old school, but when you're still trying to patch together linear TV, broadcast radio, out of home, all of it, you still do need that person level with those top line metrics. And then we can get funky with the sort of, the LiveRamp patching everything together and actually do particularly that experiment side of things. That's really important, of making sure we're testing. So when we're looking at case studies like James showed, making sure you've got that control group as well as exposed group to actually know what you're seeing and make sure it's based on the activity and not just, it's what would have happened in market anyway.
Absolutely, and I think one of the things that I hear quite a bit, obviously in the TV space, is incremental unique reach. We've all heard that term before. Things like on-target audience efficiency to a common KPI. Natalya, you work with a lot of brands and agencies, a lot of large ones, a lot of mediums and smalls as well. How do you help brands and agencies essentially value those audiences accordingly to run an efficient TV campaign with first-party data?
Yeah, so it's a really tough question. But at LiveRamp, at our heart and at our core, we're an identity resolution provider. So what that means is we want to make it easier for marketers, for brands, for agencies to link together all of the different data sets across channel, across device. And from a TV perspective, we want to be able to integrate TV into that mix as well. So you don't have to worry about not being able to, about channels, but you just need to worry about being able to access the right consumer at the right time with the right message, and we want to completely remove any channel restriction from that. So I think when we think about that, when you can start bringing TV into this integrated mix, you can start really understanding what conversions TV is driving. So that means that you're going to begin to be able to maximise the efficiency of those TV buys. So for example, with somebody like LiveRamp, and you can tie all that together, you can start bringing in whatever data set that you want. Take a restaurant, so for example, a brand, and they take out a TV exposure and digital exposure reports. They want to see that they're a restaurant, and they want to see how many people they drove into their restaurant. We can then start overlaying that location-based data set, so taking in a location-based data set who actually visited the restaurant, and that way we can understand the lift that TV had comparative to like their digital campaigns, for example. I think as well when we think about reach, we've always spoken about reach, but people are still going to buy across linear, right? So we're always still going to buy across linear, but how can we use TV and targeted TV to enhance that linear experience? So like James has said, there's a whole lot of people that just aren't watching linear TV anymore. So let's say I'm a brand and I still want to buy across linear, as we all will. I can still target an audience that I know are people that are never going to consume linear TV, who are only internet TV viewers, and target them across, use that first-party data and target them across TV solutions that we now have.
Amazing, and with LiveRamp in general, so it's kind of started from the enablement perspective.
Yeah.
With your clients, brands or agencies, have you helped, I guess, consult in a way that they can build data spines for themselves and constantly improve, I guess, their audience targeting?
Yeah, that's something I'm really passionate about. I think if you want to be a customer-centric marketer, you have to have a data spine, or you have to be in the process of being able to build a data spine. If you want to be a customer-centric marketer, you really have to have a handle on your data as well. And having a handle on your data means understanding identity and the role that identity plays amongst building a data spine. So identity will be that foundation that actually brings together all of your data, enables it to create this data spine. So the way that I always chat to clients around, okay, how do I build this, is first have a look in your own house. So everybody's so desperate to go out and look for what data they don't have, try and grab third-party data, strike up second-party data partnerships, which is fantastic and necessary. But if you have a good identity resolution solution, what that means is you can start, you've got PII, you've got devices, and you've got cookies. Once you link all of that together, you actually end up knowing a lot more about your customers than you first thought you did. So for example, Natalya Pollard, who is an offline record and an existing customer, might also be that anonymous cookie that's been browsing on your website and showing intent. So now you actually know that what you thought was going to be a reactivation campaign needs to have a completely different message because she's showing intent on there. Then once you kind of bring all this stuff in-house and you have a look at what you've got and you can see really what you're missing, that's when you go out and you start looking at second-party data options, third-party data options. And your data spine should always be, and the way that you look at your data spine is sounds a bit morbid saying it, but like a living and breathing thing. So you should constantly be feeding it with fresh data, fresh insights, and making sure that it becomes really sticky and really robust and really supportive and the backbone of all of the marketing that you actually execute.
And I guess, Gabe, the next push that you guys are seeing in terms of you've moved from measurement on TV, audio is kind of the next emerging channel, really, over the past kind of 18 months, and everyone's jumping onto it. 30% of Australians now are podcasting. Apparently, I don't, but it's happening. But with that, you guys have just released, I think it was February, the State of the Nation for audio, and you kind of, I guess, forecast a 50% increase in programmatic buying on audio just this year. And with a lot of like cross-media measurements and cross-platform measurement standards coming out. Number one, what are they? Or what are you working on? But number two, I guess in lieu of those being in place, what advice would you give to the people that are running audio campaigns right now?
Yeah, so that's the third year we've done our sort of State of the Nation for audio, and it's the change has been dramatic. So when we started off, it was very much, people. And actually, podcasting wasn't hot again 3 years ago, but it was, the streaming side of things, and Spotify and Pandora are still in market. So market's changed quite a lot in the last few years. Year before last, we saw programmatic coming up, particularly at the experimentation side. This year, we saw it as right, we're ready to invest. We're ready to patch it together with our other digital activity. And that's, because the inventory's there now. So Spotify have done a lot of work in it, but also the broadcasters are now putting their inventory into programmatic environments. People are playing around with dynamic insertion of creative within podcasts. So there's suddenly a big pool of inventory there. So in terms of metrics, I think they'll look similar to programmatic display to start with. We're way further down the line. So if we're talking about bringing TV and digital metrics together, OzTam, and there's a lot more similarity there. The way that broadcast radio is measured is very old school. It's, paper diaries every 15 minutes. Trying to bring those two pieces together is difficult, to say the least. And there's not necessarily a lot of appetite, may I say, from the radio guys at times to do that. So I think it will start with the traditional sort of programmatic metrics. But it's really exciting. I do worry podcasting. I adore it. Like, I'm a huge podcast fan. But it's a little bit like the BVOD thing. It's awesome, but don't just move everything there. Like, it's hot and sexier now, but just make sure you're balancing out what the consumers are really doing.
I think the only thing I'd throw in, not a measurement expert by any stretch of the imagination, but again is, going back to the objective of what you're trying to achieve, that, here we're talking quite granular level of metrics, how we reaching that individual or where they've been or what they've done, but actually, and the top end you're talking about reach and frequency, and I thought you were going to probably say sales impact as well. So, where are we in the funnel? Why are we using that channel? What is the metric that we're trying to achieve in that channel? Because it isn't necessarily always about a conversion necessarily. It might be about some kind of brand impact, sales uplift, or whatever it might be. So, there's a broad range of metrics depending on the objective that you're trying to achieve within the funnel. And obviously that balance of all those channels is kind of where you're going to get to.
Yeah, absolutely.
The one thing that's interesting with audio is the need in change of creative thinking. Because, traditional radio ads have been yelly, shouty, cut through. And now you've got majority...
And TV.
And TV, true. And now you've got the majority of people with headphones, this really intimate, lovely experience. Yeah. It's a really different type of creative development. That's
one of those things, don't have music in the background when you're doing ads on audio and Spotify. It'll just distract you because you've got your earphones in. So little things like that, little nuances are really important. Just changing tact a little bit, just conscious of time as well. Moving away from channels and going more into, I guess, ways of working. We have a lot of agencies in the room today. Livo, you guys have existed, I guess, as Mediahub for, it's going on about 2 years now, pretty much 2 years to the date. And you've almost quadrupled in size, I guess, from that start, which is a little bit scary, but also exciting. I guess, what are the key aspects that have allowed you to actually do that in such a short space of time with so much evolution and change happening in the market?
Lucky. I don't know. We, as I said earlier, I think we've got a really good kind of heritage that we've kind of been born out of, I was lucky enough to be in an adoptive environment where we had creative and media in the same space, and I think that platform has really allowed us to build a proposition that delivers against unfair share of attention, but in the middle of that is this creatively fueled media proposition, and I think it's so difficult to not only disrupt but differentiate in this marketplace. So I guess, how do we distinguish ourselves in the market? And I think it's at the end of the day, all our businesses are people. It's the uniqueness and that combination of people that's kind of given us that platform to get in. I think building on from that, taking it sort of higher up again, it's about understanding, a deep understanding of the consumer and how they're behaving, and we're looking at it from how we can get to them, but what do they receive? They don't see BVOD, AVOD, catch up, they see telly on a different kind of device and don't even necessarily distinguish then, So for us, again, it's about understanding that consumer and how do we get to that consumer in the most effective way. And again, the way we've built the thinking and the strategies behind that are all geared towards that, which is why we've ended up, I guess, moving a lot of our money towards the channels that we're discussing today that allow us to be much more kind of informed, targeted, but equally, keep up a funnel within what is a traditionally a lower funnel channel.
And I guess with that as well, it's probably allowed you to take on larger projects, bigger and larger projects, go into larger pitches than probably your team was familiar with initially as well.
Yeah, for sure. yeah. Look, I think part of who we are, I suppose, is I don't think, I'm fairly certain we'll never be pitching for Coles or Woolies. Apologies if anybody's in the room from there, but it's just not going to be who we are and the type of business that we've modeled that we've got. I think that the business model that we have doesn't work for everybody. I think we have a lot of clients where we are fully integrated, and that integrated proposition is really that platform that's allowed us to do what we've done. But we, the majority of my business is still media only. It's a pure play media. But we think like an integrated agency, and I think that's that differentiator. So in terms of bigger projects, integration, a fully integrated proposition, I don't necessarily believe works for massively scaled businesses. They need big dedicated resources in specific kind of disciplines. The cross-discipline approach that we have works probably for the more modern day, more agile marketer, and that's where we see ourselves in that agile space. That's why we're not encumbered by, we're part of a big group, as I'm sure you all know. We're part of IPG, but we're not encumbered by the businesses. We don't have to leverage those businesses that they have. We choose partners that we think are going to be most beneficial for us in the market, like Bench, for example. Those moving through that funnel, that agility allows us to be more effective. So going back to the bigger projects, yes, we want to move up in scale. I think that the challenge with scale is the same for any business, and Gil's business would have been through that too. How do you maintain the essence of what you've got as a product that's just made you successful, with that, and not cannibalizing that by trying to move up to scale, and that's the job we've got to do. I think we've definitely laid our foundations in the last sort of 18 months. Next year is about a growth phase, and we are at a scale where we can take on bigger projects, but we just need to be mindful about how we move into that space.
Yeah, amazing. Well, guys, we've got a couple of maybe a couple of minutes for questions. If anyone had any for the panel, please raise your hand. We have a microphone at the back if you do have a question. No one here? Anybody? I got one, actually. Always.
I've got a list of them.
I guess is one other thing on the ways of working is there are many different types of models in market. There is in-housing, there is out-of-housing, there's managed services, FTE models, there's hybrid models. There's so many different models, and like you're saying, not everything is designed for everyone. And I guess this is a question to the panel, guys, by the way. It's not just yourself. But have you seen some really good instances of that working for some of your clients or some of your, consultants recently, where you've just seen that's nailed it on the head, that's really worked?
I won't say that I've seen it done really well, but I will say that it's been a bit of a problem. So I'll often go to, when I talk about what LiveRamp does, and it's how do we enable people-based marketing across the wider ecosystem. We're not just plugged into just display, just social. Like, we just don't want to execute on one channel. We want to say, how do we help you do across everything? So I go to a client and they'll say, well, I've got one agency doing this, and I've got another agency doing that, and I've got another agency doing that. Who do you guys work with? Who do you want to work with? And I'm like, well, I don't know. That's up to you. So they have to figure out all this, like, they can't bring them all into a room, and it causes a lot of disparity between, they now are back to the problem, kind of having a larger problem than the one we're trying to solve. So I'm going to say, just target that person wherever they are, and they're like, oh, well, we'll target whether they are on these specific channels, and we'll target them wherever they are on these specific channels, and it's duplicating all of the work. So how that model, you guys are probably the experts on how that could work better, but there's a lot of hesitation as well for the agencies to all come into one room together.
Yeah, I suppose that's where we kind of leap over that canyon a little bit in terms of the integration. We have a lot of the properties we have in place, and we, given our sort of agnostic approach to partnership, we build them in, but we'll represent them in front of the client to say, this is how we can give you a cross-channel, cross kind of media perspective.
Having two specialist teams is better than one, but really four.
Yeah, absolutely. And you speak with one voice, and I think that again, have we got that into a perfect place? No, but are we better positioned? I think than many. Then yes. I mean, we've seen a lot of shift in terms of models trying towards merging creative and media, and I think with probably lesser success around the marketplace. But definitely that trend's there. We've seen it with creatives going into the PwCs, etc. But we've also seen media agencies merging with creative agencies. So I think clients are looking for that. As Gil talked about clients, people wanting less for more, less time, less money, and that's exactly why this is a model that potentially can work. It's got pros and cons to it. I think it works brilliantly for the client. If they can come in and they've got you and you're doing everything for everybody. But quite often that still requires a lot of different disciplines and skills. So when we have that meeting, we might need 8 people in it, which is again fairly inefficient from a business perspective. But talking of how you model that from a commercial perspective is quite interesting. I mean, we obviously. Well, in the old days, you sort of charged on commission as a media agency. I think most people are probably at least at resource-based, at a resource-based model. But how do we shift that to an output-based model? So, hey, here's a fucking brilliant idea. Pay for that. Do you know what I mean? I mean, we're delivering ideas to clients in an integrated way that may be a brand proposition that lives with them for 10 years. But we might get paid 50 grand for that, whereas,
So many people are buying based on what you're doing and executing, not for strategy and ideas of what's actually brought together for the brand.
That to shift to that is a real challenge at the moment. We kind of almost give that IP away for free, and we just get paid for our head hours. So, but that's not a complaint. That's an evolution of the business and how we it's a constraint, Gil. It's a beautiful constraint.
Beautiful one.
I'll finish that on that.
Yeah, and I think the in-housing thing in Australia is really hard. It's a small market. I don't think anyone's really doing it in a pure way. Everyone's slowly partnering and outsourcing and doing some sort of hybrid model. I mean, I do love the idea of media and creative coming together, maybe because I'm old. Not quite as old as some of the averages.
No, you're forward thinking.
But particularly with the churn in the amount of creative that we need, if they don't come together, old school, that linear model where client would say to the agency, this is what you need to deliver to me, and then if it didn't deliver, the agency would go to media owner and go, give me more. That really linear idea of it's the media responsibility at the end of the day to deliver when you're not taking in all the other variables is just not the right thing for the market at the moment. So in this market, I think we put out a paper with the AANA, so the advertiser body, and the Media Federation last year with the digital advertising practices. Marketers, and I do hate leaning in, but they're leaning in. And they're going, we've got a responsibility in making this work. It's not just bossing my vendors around to make sure it delivers. So that's really exciting.